disconnect battery from the vehicle.
First things first, gonna remove the air filter, air box, and these. This just unclips by pulling that out, like so. You got 3 8mm bolts. There's one there. There's another there. Just gonna unclip these. Once the bolts are out, it's just a case of pulling that out. Also gonna undo this so I can move that out of the way. Off, just gonna tuck that out of the way. You'll also need to remove this pipe from the turbo. It's just 2 10mm bolts holding that in. That looks like that. Bottom of the turbo, we also need to remove this pipe as well that connects to the turbo. Right, everything is now undone except for that electrical connector on the actuator. So I think we just need to press that and wiggle it a bit. That should pull out. What I'm also going to do is undo this plug here and take this bracket off, just because I want to get to stuff down here and it kind of gets in the way a bit. With that off, I can then just move it out of the way.
The heat shield will need to come off. There's a bolt on the top up by the manifold, and then there's usually 2 others around the outside edge. Top one accessed via the top, bottom one's accessed under the arch.
Right, we're going under the wheel arch for this one. You might find that you've got a plastic liner in here that you're going to need to remove. I haven't got one on mine, but that last bolt with the heat shield on the turbo is just there. Having undone bolts, should be able to just pull that out. Right, what you'll also have to do is disconnect the DPF from the turbo, and we're going to loosen the DPF off. Normally you'd have a bracket there, or a couple of brackets, one that goes to the block and sometimes another one that comes down here somewhere. I haven't, mine broke, so mine's got a different bracket on, or a different setup. I'll also need to come back here and disconnect from the main exhaust.
Once you've disconnected that, just drop the exhaust, remove it from the rubber grommets, let it sit back, and then when you undo the DPF from the turbo, that'll allow that to drop down.
Started disconnecting that DPF from the turbo end.
There are 3 studs or nuts bolts holding that DPF onto the turbo, so you'll need to get to all 3 of those. Access to a couple of those was via under that wheel arch or under the car. I didn't have ramps, I just crawled under there. It's a good idea to spray these WD-40 a few days before some sort of lubricant.
Start disconnecting the turbo from the manifold there, so that's just a 13 socket.
The last 2 are accessed under the vehicle.
We've got 2 bottom bolts connecting that turbo to the manifold that we need to get off. 13mm. Right, they're both loose at the moment, but what I want to do is undo this oil return pipe here.
That was just two 8mm bolts holding that on.
Right, in order to get that runoff pipe, the oil runoff pipe, I need to undo this one and move this out of the way, because underneath it kind of wraps round and inhibits access. So we'll get this out of the way. That's now off, and ducks out of the way a bit, so hopefully it allows us to get that oil return off down the bottom. Right, so turbo's out. So once all of those bolts were off, we got the oil return off, the oil feed from the top. We've unplugged the actuator, we've disconnected the pipes to the intercooler. It's a case of trying to wiggle it out at that gap. Once that DPF's dropped down, there was enough room to kind of wiggle that out. There will be some studs that stay in there. There's one on the one that goes to the DPF, and there's another one that goes to the manifold. I've actually taken that out because I had to borrow that because I lost the other one. But breaking this down, there's not a lot to it. You've got the DPF connection, 3 bolts, nuts, etc. You've got the manifold connection. So basically that was sitting on the car like that. Actually no, it wasn't like that. So that connects to the manifold, that connects to the DPF, so your turbo in there, intercooler, and then the plug for the actuator. Just to note, on that top one, there's the oil feed hole. Copper washer, new copper washer goes on there. They're normally supplied with the Recon turbos, and on the oil return pipe there's a gasket, a new gasket that will go on there as well, and there's gaskets supplied for the DPF feed and the manifold. Old turbo, new turbo. Got new studs, gaskets for the new one. So next step, fit in. So new turbo's in, and it is literally just doing the opposite to what you did for taking it off. It's in, job done. Right, what I would say is, while this isn't the best selection of tools in the world, you just sort of make sure you're prepared. So some of my bolts were hex head, but then they ended up rounding off. So I got myself a set of these. This actually worked a treat and got me out of trouble. Again, with some of your bolt heads and things, just using your sockets and things, there's chances are a lot of this stuff's going to be rusted up or hasn't been touched for a long while. I'd spray it with WD-40 a few days before, or even a day before, maybe a couple of times if you know you're going to do this, just because, you know, they're going to be sort of rusted up and things. Again, when I've had bolts and things that start to round off using spanners, sockets and things, you kind of panic. It's like it's rounding off, but you can buy these things, they're really cheap, and that's got me out of trouble as well. Again, there's hard to reach places, so a selection of sort of extension bars, you know, sometimes I sort of, you know, getting under the car and adding 2 or 3 of these just to get to stuff. So say I didn't have any ramps, so I either did it sort of under that wheel arch, or sort of from under the car, but impact driver as well. That helps. Some of the rusted stuff just gives you a bit of a head start on it. So yeah, it's definitely worth being prepared, because if it's going to go wrong, it will go wrong.